Welcome, and thank you for clicking on this video. In this video, I'm going to talk about dead spots on my Hofner bass and the approach I took to get rid of them. This can also apply to other fully hollow or semi-hollow basses as well. Let's go. This is my Hofner Club bass. It's from their Contemporary series. Shortly after I got this bass, I restrung it with Thomastic infeld flatwounds, and I've made several videos using this bass strung up with those TI flats. But lately, I've been wanting a slightly different sound from this bass. So I've since restrung this bass with the Labella deep talking bass. These are their stainless steel flatwounds that were designed specifically for the Hofner Beatle bass. Now the club bass and the Beatle bass share the same scale and similar dimensions, but the body shape is different. But otherwise, the tuning machines and more importantly, the string wound length are more or less the same. What I didn't expect, however, was new dead spots that appeared out of nowhere. When the TI flats were on this bass, it played pretty evenly up and down the neck, and there were not very many highly noticeable dead spots. With the Labellas, however, I had a pretty bad dead spot on the A note on my low E string, and similarly the A at the 12th fret on the A string. This wasn't really there when it was strung with TI flats. So much to my disappointment, my first knee-jerk reaction was to blame the string. But inspecting the string, the silk, the winding, and the balls, the string itself looked pretty good. That doesn't mean it can't be a dud out of the factory, but the overall physical appearance of the string did not look defective. And there seems to be lots of other Hofner players who complain about G sharp and A dead spots. Some other players complain about variable dead spots all over the E and the A strings. And I know, having looked after this bass, it's not a fret issue, it's not a set neck issue, there are no cracks, there are no changes in the binding, the bridge is seated properly on the top of the bass, my strings are perfectly aligned over the pickup, the pickup height is not too high and not too low, it's in a good spot, so it's not a setup issue and it's not a construction issue. Let's start with some whole notes and I can demonstrate the dead spot. I'm going to play that note again. So here, on this bass, the notes around G sharp and A sound quite different than the surrounding notes. Let's hear it again. You can hear beats. You hear even more beats and a more significant volume drop. Seemingly back to normal. A similar thing also happens around the 12th fret on the A string. It's not as bad, but it's still noticeable. I was quite disappointed with this because I was really looking forward to these Labella strings. And then I remembered with my experiences on the cello, this could be a wolf note. Let's talk about what a wolf note is. A wolf note can happen when the pitch of the played note is close to the particularly strong natural resonant frequency of the body of the musical instrument. And it can sound like a stuttering or a warbling sound. I think what we're hearing on this bass is a wolf note. Let's quickly talk about some of the physics behind a wolf tone. if you put two notes of the same pitch together, they're going to have the same wavelength. So the peaks and the troughs will line up with each other. However, if you have two notes of slightly different pitches, the peaks and the troughs will not always line up. And as a result, you're going to end up with some parts of the wavelength where it will be amplified and some parts of the wavelength where it will be cancelled. Now, practically speaking, what we hear as the listener is that warbling beat type note where it kind of goes whoa, 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 right? And what also results with the phase cancellation is a decrease in volume and sustain and what we hear as a dead spot. Let's hear this dead spot in the context of a groove, so you can kind of hear it in the context of other notes. On this bass right now, I'm going to run the volume around 75%, and the switches are on rhythm, bass off, treble off, and we're only going to run the neck pickup. So you can hear every time I hit that low A, you do hear some beats there. In my travels as a cellist, wolf notes are very common on cellos, and it's just inherent in the design of the instrument. And unfortunately, the design of cellos really hasn't changed for several hundred years. So we're using very similar dimensions and similar designs, and it just hasn't deviated from that. For us to change the wolf note on a cello, first of all, you have to make sure all your instruments are in proper order. There are no cracks, no open seams. The bridge is seated carefully and perfectly. And as well, very importantly, you have to make sure your sound pose is well adjusted. Once you've ruled out all those other potential causes of dead spots and wolf notes, then you're looking for a way to manipulate the resonance of the instrument in such a way where you're actually moving that wolf tone to a part of the instrument or to a note that you don't play. Typically, you're hoping to move it to in-between notes. So on a cello, we have several options, and on this cello here, I'm using this device here, and then it's called a wolf tone suppressor. There are lots of different options. The common ones are the steel barrel types. There are also kind of new fancy ones where you have different weights you can use. And then there are also these kind of fancy screw-on types. Really all you're doing is you're adding mass to the string and you're changing the relationship of how the instrument resonates within itself. In the land of bass guitars, you've probably either seen or heard of those old fat finger devices that have been around for quite some time now. Essentially, that's a C clamp that you put on your headstock. Now, those fat fingers were originally marketed to increase sustain, but what it's actually doing is it's changing the resonant note of that neck, and you're moving the dead spots in the wolf notes to a different location. So these can be particularly effective on some of the older Fender necks where there are dead spots around C, C sharp, D, sometimes F sharp, depending on the bass. And by applying the fat finger, you're actually moving that dead spot to hopefully a different note that you don't actually play. Now, trying to adopt that kind of thinking to this Hofner bass, I didn't really want to attach a fat finger, and putting a C clamp on the headstock just looks rather unsightly. But given my experiences with the cello, I wanted to see whether or not some of those wolf tone suppressor devices could work on this Hofner. I do have some space between the tailpiece and the bridge after all, not unlike a cello. Unfortunately, these bass strings are quite a bit thicker in diameter compared to a cello string, and a lot of these devices simply did not fit. On my last cello, I used this rubber mute as a wolf tone suppressor, and I just shoved it between the strings, and it worked really, really well, and I like the tone I got out of it. The only problem with it is it tended to move, so as you're playing, it just kind of slid further and further down with gravity, and by the end of the song, it's no longer in the right spot. So that's the only reason why I stopped using it. So I tried putting this mute here, but it was just a bit too small and it didn't fit properly. So then I kind of looked around the studio and said, well, what else do I have that's kind of similar in kind of weight and texture, but slightly larger? And I found a cymbal felt, and that fit in there. So let's see how well it works. Let's hear this A again. Now let's put the cymbal felt in between the bridge and the tailpiece. Just wedge that in there. Now let's hit that A again. The sustain of that note is considerably better than it was before. Let's hit the G sharp. So what's that? Let's hear those whole notes again. It's not perfect, but it's considerably better. And this is non-invasive. I haven't drilled any holes, I haven't modified anything, I just shoved the cymbal felt in there. Let's hear that groove again with the cymbal felt in. Now to my ear, that sounds considerably better. Let's take it out and see what happens. You can hear the beats. The note sounds considerably thinner, and you hear the beats of it being slightly out of tune. Put the cymbal felt back in. Voila! Now, how I made this cymbal felt fit is I took a Gibraltar large size and cut it in half. The stock small size cymbal felts, which is a size I prefer, typically used actually on cymbals, were too narrow to fit between the strings. So I just took a large one and cut it in half. Voila. So this may or may not work for your Hofner or your semi-hollow or hollow bass. This is just the kind of the principle and the idea behind wolf tone suppression that I think could work and could apply to your Hofner bass. And again, we're just trying to add a little mass to the string to change its resonant relationship with itself. And we're just trying to move that wolf note to a different part of the neck and hopefully to a note where you don't play. And on a fretted instrument, if you get lucky, you can move that note to something in between the frets, then hopefully that will eliminate the wolf tone from a player's perspective. After some experimentation, I found on this bass it worked the best with a cymbal felt between the E and the A string. But experiment, put it in between different strings, and I hope this could work for you. Let's hear this bass now, strung with Labella stainless steel flatwounds 4 Beatle bass up against the drum track, and then you can hear how this bass sounds. The first pass will have the bass with the volume at 75% and the switches on rhythm, bass off, treble off. And then the second pass, we'll put a little piece of foam underneath the strings by the bridge pickup to decrease the sustain and add a little more thump. And I hope you enjoy this playing example. Well, that wraps it up for this video. I hope you found this helpful, and I hope you can take this approach to trying to eliminate the dead spots from your Hofner, semi-hollow, or other hollow basses. Good luck. See you next time.